now I'll hide those floating panels. So welcome to our first Lunch and Learn of 2025. I cannot believe we've reached 2025. Somebody made a comment the other day that it was 03 when she did something. And I said, you mean 23? And she goes, oh my gosh, it is, I meant 23. And I'm like, yeah, because 03 was like 20 years ago. Wow, somebody's getting old. How many of you came simply because you've got some relationship that you want to work on? Just a particular relationship?
Oh, no. Well, we always want to work on relationships. So yeah, I think all of us, there's always somebody that we need to have a better relationship in the workplace. Yeah.
I have several conflicts that I could use help resolve.
Got several of them. Well, oftentimes people come and they've got this one particular relationship that they just can't get a grip on. And whether we live with them or work with them or are on committees with them, we need to be able to figure out a way that we can interact with each other without losing our mind. And conflict is a really interesting challenge for most people, because very few of us learn to fight the exact same way. I have a friend of mine that is a marriage counselor, and I'm always picking his brain because relationships are one of those things that I find fascinating. And he said that one of the key components to a healthy relationship is how well they fight, because there's always going to be conflict. It's what you do with that conflict that makes the difference. And so I'm hoping today that we can come together and get some tools in our toolbox and really help resolve some conflict that's happening in your life, because I believe that the world is in a place where we need some people that can fight fair and disagree and still continue to work together. Conflict resolution is a way for two parties to find peaceful solutions to a disagreement among them. It could be personal, it could be financial, it could be political or emotional. But when a disagreement arises, oftentimes the best course of action is to negotiate and resolve the disagreement quickly, because if you don't solve a conflict, what can happen? Anyone?
I'm sorry, repeat the question.
If you don't take action and solve conflict, what can happen?
We have, it gets worse and it festers.
Exactly. And oftentimes it clouds our judgment and other interactions with that individual or with that group of people. And so one of the things that I have found really helpful is when we're starting to talk about conflict resolution, and conflict is to really understand what that conflict is and what it's costing us. There's a quiz, and it's not too bad. It's 24 questions long, but I would love for you to take a few minutes and go through that quiz. It's on the paperwork that I sent you. It's in the back. But it's rate each of the following statements from 1 to 5, where 1, you strongly disagree, and 5, you strongly agree. Don't overthink them, because when we overthink, we oftentimes end up in the middle and we don't get a real true picture. But think of a person with whom you're currently experiencing conflict, and then go through this process with me. They respect me and consider my opinions. Question 1. Does anyone need more time?
Yes.
Give you just a little bit more. So here's what we do with that information is that you check your score and it points to a basic psychological need that's not being met in that particular relationship. And so it challenges us to take a look at the next time we find ourselves in conflict with someone to ask yourself, what is my core need that is driving my conflict? And then how might I move us into a conversation rather than conflict? I found this information really helpful because a lot of times what happens in conflict, at least in my own personal experience, is there are triggers that get and buttons that get pushed. And so one of the things that I have had to struggle with because I was a conflict avoider is understanding that conflict is not necessarily a bad thing. When can conflict be a good thing?
Conflict is good to create clarity. I guess, if there's a white elephant in the room, to open up the conversation.
Validate your feelings too.
Validate your feelings, possibly. Show empathy.
The other person's wrong.
I'm right.
I'm right, you're wrong.
Yes. Well, oftentimes we can both be right or wrong. And that's the scary part.
Well, I think that conflict is good to show clarity and open up a dialogue of, if it's a policy or procedure or something, then ask, well, what would you do? How would you handle, like, if you didn't like this policy, what would you want it to look like? And then kind of go from there and maybe just have an open dialogue about it.
So growth, an opportunity for growth. Some of my deepest relationships have come out of a conflict situation and how we resolved it together. Because I really do believe that oftentimes conflict shows character. How you fight, how you approach situations where you may not see eye to eye, I think shows a lot of what you're made of. And so a lot of times conflict can strengthen relationships. It can result in favorable change. It really is being able to step into, hey, we don't see things the same way. Let's take a look at how things are. Carl Jung, who's one of my favorite authors to quote, he's the gentleman that gave us the personality, says, two people see the same object, but they never see it in such a way that the image they receive is absolutely identical. So many times people don't see things the same way. They observe a situation and they witness different outcomes, right? When you think about how many eyewitnesses does it take to get the truth, right? He was a short guy, he was a fat guy, he was old. We have these different measuring sticks, and the thing that we usually use as the measuring stick is ourselves and our own personal experience. And so it behooves us to remember that people are not seeing things the same way. And so one of my favorite techniques for dealing with conflict comes from Stephen Covey. And I'm rereading his book right now, The Speed of Trust. And in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, he tells us to seek first to understand and then to be understood, meaning understand where that other person's coming from before you start injecting how you're seeing a situation. I talk about the pitcher of water technique and the fact that if we're looking at a situation where the person is looking at a handle and you're not able to see that handle, they're going to spend all their time talking about a handle that you can't see. You have to be big enough to come to the other side of the table and say, oh, I see how you're looking at it. You have this handle. I'm looking at it at this side and it doesn't have a handle. What do you think we ought to do about this situation? But so many times we come in with, I'm right and you're wrong, and let me tell you why I'm right. And what we do is we shut down conversation, people become defensive. And so just being able to understand where's that other person coming from, I think is really, really important. Covey also tells us that 90% of the communication that happens is rooted in semantics or perceptions, meaning a word might mean something different than to you, or a look or a tone might mean something different to you, and that's not their intention. And so just getting that clarification is so vitally important to understanding where conflict's coming from and why we're not seeing eye to eye. I love the 6 and the 9, because depending on what angle you're looking at a situation, you're both right. How many of you have gotten flowers and put a meaning to those flowers?
Are you
How many people have
I've
gotten
gotten
flowers
flowers
and
and
meaning
what
to
do you
it?
mean? Well, I only know
Well-
the meaning because of what the card says, because I'll look at them and go, oh, they're pretty, and then who sent me flowers?
Right? Or you jump to a conclusion based on your previous experience or what you believe their intention is. You know, he might be sending you flowers to say, I love you. And you're thinking, what did he do wrong? Right? Based on your past experience. And so what happens is things happen throughout the day. Interactions happen with people. We view a situation and we jump to a conclusion based on previous experience, because people are really notorious for wanting to simplify things. We are hardwired to jump to conclusions because it keeps us moving at a faster pace. If we had to stop and think about every single thing that we see or hear, we wouldn't be able to function. And so we have a tendency to fill in the blanks with past experiences. Years ago, I had this, I used to sell real estate. I'm actually a realtor again, but years ago when I was a realtor, I sold this home of a very locally famous artist, right? And I was helping her move. I had my list, sell, and help you move real estate business, basically. And I was helping her move, and I came across this painting, and I said, Joyce, what do you want me to do with this? And she goes, oh, throw it away. It's not done. And I said, oh, but it's beautiful. Can I keep it? And she goes, oh, I don't care. And so I took this unfinished painting of hers. And you know how artists will kind of like smear a spot to hold until they figure out what they're going to do with it. She had done this, and it had beautiful mountain and a river and sky. Her sky was gorgeous. She was really known for her skies. And I hung it on the wall, and people would come and they'd say, oh, I love that painting. And I'm like, what one? And they're like, the one with the cabin in it. Well, there was no cabin. People were putting a cabin in that spot. Or the one with the deer. There's no deer. They were filling in the blanks. And so I always thought, you know, gosh, if I was ever a really great artist, I would do these finish the fantasy paintings where you leave a blank spot and let people fill it in with what they see. Because we do that as humans. These are two of my labs, and Miss Sunny and Miss Winnie. Winnie, the brown one, absolutely loves people. And when she sees people, she will actually start going like this, trying to get to them. Well, I walk the dogs up and down the hill, up to the Rogue Valley Manor, and I walk them together. And when people see this great big dog going like this at them, they have one of two responses. If they're dog lovers, they oftentimes go, oh, there's a Labrador that needs love. And they'll come up and pet her. But if you've been bit by a dog, or you're scared of dogs, or you've never been around big dogs, you'll cross the street. You'll be afraid. Winnie can't understand that because she thinks everybody should be your friend. But your experience is your experience based on what you've experienced in life. And so many times our misconceptions and our misunderstandings happen around a situation. And trying to understand where those differences come from is, I think, part of the job of conflict resolution. George Bernard Shaw said this: the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it had taken place. Oftentimes we don't communicate. We talk, but we don't hear, or we talk and they hear, but they don't respond back. So there's not a two-way communication. I'm running into that situation right now with my father-in-law, who's in and out of the hospital in another state, and he can't hear. So our conversations are one-sided, meaning he tells me, but he can't hear my response. And it's really, really frustrating. And there's been a lot of communication breakdown because I can't get clarification and he can't hear my responses. We're working on a couple of different solutions, but it can be really challenging when you're not understood. The biggest portion of our communication is not the words we say, it's actually the body language and tone. And when you think about that, so many times we're communicating or miscommunicating through things like emails and text messages, where tone and body language isn't part of the conversation. And so we don't understand what that other person's intent is. And body language can be huge because it is oftentimes misunderstood. In the longer class and the larger times, in the times where I can teach this in a half-day seminar, oftentimes what we do is we'll do a body language game where somebody makes a gesture, and then you have to guess what they mean. And most of the time, it takes a while for you to understand what that other person means by their body language. So understand that miscommunication can happen in various places, and part of getting to the bottom of where the conflict lies is in understanding where that conversation fell apart. Because I don't believe most people come into the world and say, I'm going to screw up everybody's day. I think what happens is we start tripping over each other. There's some things that have been shown to cause conflict, and they call it the 4 areas of conflict. And the first one is information. We may not have the same information. I may have different information than you do. And so verifying and sharing that information is really important to get to the bottom of what is the truth, right? What is the foundation we're working on? The goal, like what is our goal? Where are we headed? There may be conflict in the fact that we want the same thing, but oftentimes what happens is we don't necessarily want the same thing. So it's not a matter of competition. It's a matter of understanding that you could both win if we were open about our objectives. But when we're not open and transparent, do people know when we're faking it or when we're hiding things?
So your question is, if we are not open and transparent, do they know where we're coming from?
Do they know we're hiding something?
Oh,
Have you ever?
I would say, well, if we weren't open and transparent, then they wouldn't know where we're coming from. So we need to be open and transparent.
They wouldn't know you're hiding something.
They wouldn't know we're hiding something, but they might feel that we were hiding something if we were not open and transparent.
Bingo. And we are actually hardwired to look for truth in people. Like, are they friend or are they foe? And when we don't feel that people are being open and honest, there's a lack of trust.
What I like to say to everyone is always come to a situation that people are 100% have good faith. And that because if you come into a situation always thinking that, then you're less likely to have those feelings of someone's out to get me, if that makes sense. I don't know.
Oh, it does. It does. When we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of need, our need of social belonging, of being part of a group, of being valued and appreciated is huge. It's like our need for air almost. And when we don't feel valued and we don't feel appreciated, we start becoming scared that we're going to be kicked out of the tribe. And if we're kicked out of the tribe, we won't survive. And so there's a real hardwired response that when people don't feel trust, when they don't feel trusted, and when they don't feel they can trust. And so really being open to what you want to accomplish. Oftentimes it says, we could both win. I mean, there's no reason why we can't do both. Or I might support yours so that later I can get mine. Mine might not be as important to have right this second. And so just really being that transparent person. The thing that I see happen often is we want to do the same thing, but we want to do it in a different way. And this is a conflict that oftentimes happens between men and women because the way our brains are wired. They say that if you want to have a conversation, if you're a female and you want to have a conversation with a man, tell them what you want. Don't tell them how you want to get it. Because when we start explaining how we come to the conclusion, oftentimes they zone out and they don't hear what we're saying, or they wouldn't do it that particular way. They're not opposed to the goal or what we want, but they're opposed to how we want to do it. And so being open to the process being a little different and not being it my way or the highway can really change the area of conflict. This one is the toughest one. And when you're working with someone whose your values don't match, when you're living with somebody who your core values don't match, it becomes extremely challenging sometimes to find value in that person. And so you have to really peel back the layers, so to speak, and value them as a living human being, and then build from there. Finding that commonality, finding value in the mosaic that is life. And it is really challenging, I have seen. And this is where a lot of our political challenges are coming in, is our values are not maybe lining up as well. But if you start peeling it back to the very basic core, I think we find that everybody wants the same thing. They want to be valued and appreciated for who they are. And so just understanding that can move you towards solution and resolution. I'm going to go through this conflict management strategy super quick, and then take a quick little stop to see how everybody's doing, because we're at 12:24. And I don't have my cohort here to help me with this, so I don't know if anybody's popping anything in chat. So if you have a comment or a question, please unmute. There's 5 different strategies, if you will, for conflict management. It really depends on what your outcome is, what you want out of the relationship, what you want out of the situation. And so there's in terms of goals and achieving those goals and relationships, the importance of relationships with the center where they come together being 0 and then out to affinity. There's 5 different techniques, and one of them is avoidance. If you don't care about the situation, if you don't care about the relationship, then for goodness sakes, avoid the conflict. You don't have to deal with every single conflict that comes your way. If they say it's gray outside, does it matter? There are people that I think thrive on conflict. And I've learned to just like water over a duck's back, let it go. It doesn't matter. I think of Chevy Chase in Vacation, when those guys in the truck, just let them go. Road rage is one of those things. I mean, let them go. It's not your fight. It's not your concern. Just let it go. Accommodate. If you care more about the person than you do winning, let them win. These 2 are pretty quick and pretty easy and very, most of our conflicts that go on in this world, I think, fall in that category. The one that everyone talks about is when you're in competition. If you are in competition with, say, in a sales situation, or where they're pitting you in a contest, if you want to win and you don't care about the relationship, then by all means go ahead and compete. A lot of times it's one My problem is I don't compete well. I'm one of those, I want you to win too. So I oftentimes go to accommodation because I care more about people than I do about winning oftentimes. Um, which means I lose a lot, but I'm a good loser. Um, because I want people to be successful. Um, but by all means compete. This is the one that leaves me always lukewarm. I don't know about you, but compromise is kind of like I give up something, you give up something, and neither one of us are super happy about it, but life goes on. Um, it is a way to get through things pretty quick. My favorite is to collaborate and to come up with a better idea, because if you put your ideas and my ideas together, we come up with a better idea and we strengthen our relationship. That's my preference, but that takes the longest time, and it takes a level of maturity that not everyone has. And so really taking a look at, what do I want out of this situation? You don't have to tackle everything the same way. So how are we doing so far? Anybody got any thoughts on this?
Nope, I think we're good.
Okie dokie. So how many of you, by either show of hands on the screen or unmuting, have taken our personality assessment or personality classes? I thought you had joined us at that. And Hannah, I know you have. The fact of the matter is, a lot of our conflict that happens in life is really boiled down to our personalities. It's you might be fast paced and I'm slower paced. You might make your decision with your head and I make mine with my heart. We don't see eye to eye, and we irritate each other. I always say that, jokingly, that you can irritate your coworker just by being yourself, and they can irritate you. And so understanding and running it through the lens of their personality, and really understanding, hey, where are they right now? I think is really important. We have a full day workshop with our personalities, our colorful connections. I'm going to go through this super fast because I want you to see where maybe that person that irritates the heck out of you is just your opposite personality style, and you need a little bit more understanding how they tick, and for them to have a better understanding how you tick. And so this box right here is actually a person. They might be somebody you know super well, or might be somebody you just met. And if any of you want our branching chart with our communication tips, just drop me an email and I'll send it to you. But that person either exhibits engaging or reserved personality and behavior, meaning they're either talking to you or they're not talking to you. And it happens like that you can tell the difference. And that's the first level of irritation that happens with people, is that if you're an engaging person, you're trying to interact with people and they won't interact with you, we're hardwired to start judging that person. Oh, they don't like me. They think they're better than I am. I've done something to offend them. I used to try to fund them up and pull them out of their hole and get them to talk to me, which only built their wall up bigger. And they were like, go away, crazy lady. I don't trust you. I don't know what you want from me, but go away. So my advice is, if you're an engaging person and you're trying to interact with somebody who's not engaging with you, slow down to connect to them. Get to understand who they are before you jump all over them like a tiger. The engaging form takes two branches. One of them is driving and the other is cheerful. It's how you make your decision. So the driving direct red is very like a flame. They know exactly what they want. They don't cut corner, or they don't chit chat. They're direct and to the point, and they oftentimes come across kind of blunt because they're in a hurry and trying to get stuff done. The cheerful, dynamic sunshine yellows are happy and bouncy and cheerful and kind of scattered, and they've got tons of things going on, and they don't stay really focused, and they can irritate the direct red who's trying to get this particular thing done. But they're both high energy, and they both process out loud, meaning they talk out loud to figure out what's going on or what they want to do, which most of the time works pretty well. And oftentimes a person comes with a lot of red and yellow mixed together, so they kind of look orange. Those individuals can get a lot done if they can learn to row the boat in the same direction and respect one another's gifts and strengths. So the reserved individual, if you get them talking to you, you've got a warm, caring, empathic tone or a cool, analytical tone that usually comes across. The warm, caring, we call caring green, with the heart-shaped root tree. They care about everything. They are natural born listeners. They put tasks off to the side to deal with the human issues all the time. They do things like, it's okay, I'll take care of it. It's okay, I'll take care of it. Until the day they blow up the bus that they threw themselves under, and then it blows everybody away because that sweet person just turned vicious and you don't understand what went wrong. But it hurts to get ran over by a bus, even if you intentionally throw it under yourself under it. Understanding who they are and that they won't say no, that they may be overwhelmed is really important, especially if you're managing people. But if it's you, it's really important that you learn to say no, because otherwise you're going to get overwhelmed and you'll find yourself blowing up and then you implode the other direction. So self-care is learning to say no. The detail blue, the analytical thinkers, they're the ones that invented email, so they wouldn't have to talk to us. They would prefer you send them an email with all the attachments and then make an appointment to show up and discuss whatever it is that email is about. They don't want to talk about anything else. They just want to be focused and to the point. And so when you start looking at where your personality is, where the other person's personality is, it may just be a personality conflict, and learning to communicate with them the way they need to be communicated with will improve that conflict. And recognize that sometimes you can make their situation worse. Like I oftentimes kind of pour gasoline on the flame, or on the gasoline on the fire that is an emergency or a conflict, because of my own personality. And I'm learning to step back and not do that is super important, because you can really impede progress if you don't. But for further information, you can go through our program. Like I said, drop me an email, I'll send you the card. But in a nutshell, if you're dealing with somebody who's in red space, you want to be fast and efficient with their time. They're just trying to get stuff done. And if things aren't getting done, they get stressed. For yellow energy, they want it to be fun and interactive. They mix things up all the time. Don't put them in a box. It causes stress. For the caring green individuals, if you can just be real with them and slow down and not take advantage of them, you'll find that you have a really hardworking, dedicated person in your life. Non-emotional with all the facts for blue energy. They don't like surprises, good or bad. So if you just kind of keep things on the level, you'll find that they are very steadfast individuals. Like I said, I'm happy to send you the Quick Connect personality card. Just reach out to me. But since this is about conflict, understand that if you are impeding things getting done, the red energy is going to be stressed and they're going to push harder. If you are no fun and doing all things by the rules and are boring, yellow energy is going to act out. And oftentimes that looks like a little bit of a temper tantrum. I unfortunately am one of those. They have meltdowns. With green energy, if you're taking advantage of other people, or if you are not addressing like abuse and that sort of thing, you're going to find green energy will start mumbling and will be almost passive aggressive, because they don't like direct conflict, but they will make your life miserable. Blue energy, if things aren't getting done correctly, if people are hilly-nilly and breaking rule, if they're rule breakers, you will see their wall go up, and behind their wall they're saying, you people are idiots. And oftentimes, if you're one of the feeling energies, you can feel that they know you're an idiot, or they think that you're an idiot. And so it can cause conflict, where conflict doesn't necessarily have to be if you leave them alone and give them the way they need to be communicated with. Does that make sense? I went through that pretty quick.
I think, Mary, you may have sent me or given me those cards before, but I don't know where they went. So can you just email me that slide or that card or,
I can.
okay.
I definitely can, Julie. So let me just make a note. Send Julie cards. I'll send you both the stress and the other, because the reason why I have this picture out here is this is kind of what red looks like when they're stressed. Red energy loses it because they are trying to get stuff done and they want you out of the way. So they can go get stuff done, or they want you to go do it.
Well, can't we be kind of like dual sided, so we can be sort of like you know, dynamic yellow, but also caring green. So it's not just like all of one, I mean, in situations, but we lean towards one for sure. And then we have
Well,
like,
here's the interesting thing, and the reason why ours is a little different, and I feel bad about doing this so fast, but I couldn't go through conflict without talking about how personalities play a role in it. We are all four of them. So situationally, developmentally, you can be in any of the four personality styles, but you're only one at a time. And different things cause stress for different personalities. And there are different gifts and there's different weaknesses in each one of the personality styles. Like I said, yellow energy, if things are too hard to do, or if people aren't doing it together, they kind of have little meltdowns, or they disappear, because yellow energy likes to have fun. And if you're not fun, they just go away. Green energy has a tendency to kind of be pouty or mumbling when things aren't going right. They don't directly confront you often. And then blue energy is very laser focused and very shut down. It's really challenging to go through it in that short little window of time because it's so much more complex. But like I said, I could not put it in there because it does play a huge role in where a lot of conflict lies, is on how we do things. But then if you think about it, we've got our personalities, we've got our male, female, we've got where we were raised, which generation we were raised in, whether we have siblings or not, whether we've traveled or not, whether we've lived in other countries or not. There's so many complex things that contribute to conflict that when we start looking at the bigger picture of conflict, if we go under, I think you said it best, Julie, if we have faith and realize that most people are not here to have conflict, we're just tripping over each other. And if we can stay reasonable and try to figure out how can we resolve this, we can get to the bottom of it. The next page talks about, like I said, you know, an hour is such a short period of time. I typically teach this in a half-day class, so we can't go as deep and we can't do as much practice. But there are 4 steps for managing conflict, and the first one is to let people get it all out. If you let them vent while you're listening, and listen, not be defensive, but actually listen to what they're saying, you oftentimes can figure out what the real problem is, the root of the problem. But if you cap them off, if you interrupt them, you'll have to start all over again. They say things like, "You're not listening," and then they start all over, and they're usually escalated. There is a technique that we practice in a lot of my classes called pacing, backtracking, and clarifying. And that is to really get to the true source of the conflict. So you are going to pace their words. I'm going to go through this in depth, but you're going to pace their words. You're going to backtrack and make sure you understand what they're saying. And then you're going to clarify by putting it in your words what the problem is. And then the next step is you got to work to a solution, not tell them how to fix it, but work towards a solution together. Oftentimes, if you ask them, "What do you need right now?" they'll say, "Nothing. I just wanted you people to know you got a problem," or "Nothing. It's too late now. You can't fix it." Or they may ask for the sun and the moon and the stars and you can't give it to them. So you have to say, "Unfortunately, I can't do that, but let's see what we can do." and work towards a solution that you both agree to. And then the final thing is follow through. Make sure it actually got resolved, because if they went away, you know, a lot of times customer service is, well, if they go away, they're gone and it's taken care of, but that's not the truth. They will then start a campaign on social media, or they think about it a while longer and then they come back madder, or, you know, there's all kinds of things that can go wrong if you just let them go. Make sure that you follow through, that it's actually been solved. The pacing, backtracking, and clarifying, like I said, I'm going to go through those independently, is something that I learned way back in the day when I was working for Montgomery Wards. And this is like back in 1970, like 79, 80-ish. Because one of the examples, I was actually pregnant and I had my daughter in 80. So, but when people are angry, you've got to pace their intensity. I know that there's a technique called whispering, where you talk quiet and soft. But the problem with talking quiet and soft to somebody who's really agitated is that it sounds condescending, and it can sound like you aren't really listening and that you're superior to them. There's techniques that you can use that use the words that they use. Now, I'm not saying you throw F-bombs at them, but I am saying that if they're talking about their rig, you don't say, oh, you mean your SUV? You don't correct them. So you want to use the words that they're using because it makes sense to them. And you want to talk to them in the speed that they're talking. You don't talk slow like they're idiots. I made this mistake yesterday, and I teach this stuff. I had somebody hang up on me because she said that I was treating her like a child, because I stopped talking at my normal pace and started talking slower and louder, like maybe she would understand what I was saying. And it did come across condescending. And I had to apologize for that one. But if you keep the speed and the pace up, if you match their body language, meaning if they're standing, you stand. If they're sitting, you sit. If they're standing sideways, you stand sideways. You match what they're doing, because it's a sign of connection at a human level, at a lower limbic level. Backtracking, like I said, this is what I heard you say. This one is tricky too, because if you do it wrong, it can also come across condescending. You want to use their exact words because you want them to know you heard them. But you have to be really careful with your tone. If you slow down your pace, if you roll your eyes, if you, one of the things that I do is I breathe, like make these sounds, it can come across wrong. So sometimes I skip this and just go straight to, okay, so this is what I'm hearing. And I want to make sure that I've got it right, because if I don't, they say, you're not listening, and they start all over again. Let's go back. Does anybody have any thoughts on this one? Pacing, backtracking, and clarifying is something that you have to kind of play with and make it your own. I have found that it can de-escalate a situation by doing it correctly. If you do it wrong, it can escalate the situation. And like I said, if you are just working towards the solution and really, hey, I know we can get this resolved. I know we're both really smart people. There's got to be something we're missing. And just really dig down into what is the problem. It's not them, it's not you, it's this problem, and focus on the problem. That can be huge. When I talk about pacing, matching their body language, what's really interesting is there's been some studies that have been done with men and women that I find interesting. And when women have problems, they look at each other face to face. And when men have problems, they look at the problem. And so if you're a woman and you're having a problem with a male colleague who says things like, she's always in my face, or, you know, she antagonizes me, it might be that you're trying to communicate with them like you would a woman. And so looking at the problem rather than right at them might change that dynamic. And if you're a man, if you're not looking at her, you're ignoring her and not hearing what she has to say. And so I thought that was a really interesting little tidbit of information as far as conflict between men and women. One of my favorite books, The Velveteen Rabbit, says this: outside we're all different, but inside we want the same thing. If we can approach every conflict with the idea that inside everybody is this little person that just wants to be loved and accepted for who they are, we can find the faith to move forward and be a resolver of conflict rather than a creator of. Another favorite quote: not all storms come to disrupt your life, some come to clear a path. There is a technique that I teach, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that there are companies that actually provide mediation and arbitration. And sometimes conflict has gotten to a place where you actually have to have a third party come in, and whether it's arbitration where they come in and make a decision, or whether it's mediation where they come in and interact with you both so that you can come to resolve, is huge. And I don't believe relationships are something that you just toss away. I don't believe people are something you just toss away. So I would, like I said, I would be remiss not to mention you might need to bring in another third party. I'm going to stop my share for a second here. Stop that. Because on the bottom of this page, some final thoughts. How many of you are journaling right now? I highly recommend journaling. If you've got a relationship that has a lot of conflict, or a relationship that's needing improved, take some time to journal about that relationship and your interactions with each other, because you'll find some nuggets. One of my favorite ways to deal with conflict is not to deal with it immediately, and that is to put yourself in timeout. I think timeouts are wasted on children. I think adults need more timeouts than kids do. Go for a walk, talk to somebody else, get your head around the situation before you respond to it. Asking yourself, how can I see a positive outcome? I mean, what do I want out of this situation? How do I want this relationship to be? The technique that I talked about, time, distance, and shielding, is something that I go deep into when I teach the full day class. And that is, there are toxic relationships. If you've ever been in a toxic relationship or been around toxic people, it is a relationship that you need to walk really carefully with, because toxic relationships can be really endangering. It can be really hard on you as a person, as far as your inner peace. I use a technique called time, distance, and shielding, and that is you spend as little time as possible with that individual. You stay as far away from them as possible, and you shield yourself with other people. You don't spend time alone with that toxic person, because toxicity is deadly. So, and the last two come from that quiz. And the next time you have conflict with someone, ask yourself, what core need is driving this? Is it because they are threatening my growth? Is it safety? Is it autonomy? Do we not agree with each other? Find out where it's coming from. What root cause is causing this? I also challenge you to look at the personalities and see, hey, am I making it worse or making it better? We've got a couple of classes coming up here very soon. The next class that we have for our Lunch and Learn is actually Kevin's branding, building your brand, part 2. And so he will be teaching that next month. February, let me double check that because I didn't put the date in here. It is February 5th. So he will be doing branding part 2. If you missed part 1, I did record it. So just let me know and I can send you a recording of that. And then we also have, stop sharing. We also have our lunch and our Excel Essentials classes coming up. The next one is actually coming up next week. We have level 2, which is my favorite. Of level 2, which is coming up, which is my favorite. And it is January 14th from 9 to noon. If you've never taken one of our Excel classes, we actually do it live on Zoom. You get a workbook, you get a recording of the live Zoom call, and it's fabulous. We sign up on either TrueNorthSkills.com or at SoulCanyon.com. And February 11th, if you've never used Excel, this is a great way to get started using Excel. We've got level 1 coming up, and that's 1 to 4 p.m. So I promised you start early or start on time and end early. Does anybody have any final thoughts on conflict?
Feeling conflicted about final thoughts.
Say that a little bit louder. I didn't hear you. Oh, Julie, mute.
Sorry, no, we're good. We're good. Yeah, thank you.
I know that was like drinking out of a fire hose. I really do. It's such a short, 1 hour is really short because it's usually a 4-hour class. The shortest I usually teach it is 2 hours. So it's a lot of information to just dump on you. But I think that if you start playing with it, if you run into any questions, give me a holler. I'm there for you. And the more you do it, the less scary it is. It's kind of like public speaking. I cut my teeth in the service department at Montgomery Wards in my early 20s, and then went into real estate after that. So conflict has been something that I've been dealing with for years, and I don't necessarily avoid it. So I'm one of those people that look forward to conflict because I think it brings about change. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.